Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to One on One Nightly, a production of WFUV Sports. I'll start this off by saying to make sure to not forget to check out the Saturday show, One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. This, however, is One on One Nightly, and I am Chris Persiainen here with Michael Calamari to start things off. We'll have Colin Loughran joining us later in the show, but Mike, we're here now to get things started. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It's going to be a great night to talk some sports. If you're looking to watch the finals tonight, we're going to preview that a little, but we're also going to have a lot to talk about, so it's going to be a great show.
Absolutely. As Mike was saying, we'll start off previewing Game 4 of the NBA Finals, which is tonight at about 9:10. Also have some off-season rumors with the NBA to get into, so stick around. We'll have analysis on all of that. Following will come some MLB talk with Colin. We had the All-Star Game, the Home Run Derby, MLB Draft, and some news come out about next season's plans from Manfred that we will certainly be debating. Stick around for talk of international sport all the way from the Olympics to the Soccer Euro Finals. Team USA's 1-2 record will be touched on. England's 1-0 record in championship games in the year 2021 will also be discussed. And we'll finish up with some Yankees and Mets talk. So have Colin back on there. Preview the second half of the season for both of our New York baseball clubs, the one in Bronx and in the Bronx and the one over in Queens. Mike, as we were saying, very excited for a jam-packed show tonight. NBA, MLB, international competition as well. Got a lot to cover, and we're going to be really excited to get into it here tonight on One Nightly. We're going to start off with basketball talk, and Colin will be joining us here to talk NBA as well. So, Colin, welcome to the show. Welcome to the segment. Great to have you on. We know you've been a shadow, working your way up. We see you. We see the climb, man, and I'm very excited to have you on today to talk about the finals. I'm going to throw it first to Mike. Kind of just give us your pick for Game 4 and why. And I want to hear from Colin after as well before I'll give mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not that hard to see this as a Bucks-dominated game once again. I think that the first 3 games of this series have really shown you that it's going to be a home court advantage dominated series. And then you can't really take it seriously until a road team is going to take one from the home team. So from what I saw in Game 3, the dominance out of Drew Holiday, Giannis, and Chris Middleton, I don't see this going other way. I mean, look at the first half alone. Giannis, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, they scored or assisted on all the 60 points for the Bucks. So
wow.
That really showed you if they keep that going into this game, if all those 3 guys are involved in the offense, and I really think that's going to be the case, then it's hard not to like the Bucks. And you can say what you want about Devin Booker not really showing up in Game 3, but even if he's there tonight, I don't see that being enough to stop this Bucks team home in Game 4.
Alan?
Mike, I got to disagree with you. I mean,
I love it.
The Bucks played very, very well in Game 3, obviously. Giannis with 40 points, 10 rebounds, or 13 rebounds, excuse me. The first player since Shaq to do it in back-to-back NBA Finals games with that 40 and 10 mark.
Talk about domination.
Devin Booker is a big difference maker. He didn't show up in Game 3. He shot 3 of 14 with only 10 points. And even Chris Paul, who's had a great playoff run, was relatively quiet, with 19 points. I just don't see it happening again where these Suns play that badly. I mean, and also to that point, I don't see it happening again that the Bucks supporting cast plays that well. I mean, obviously Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday are fully capable of playing great basketball, but you can't have another situation like you had in Game 2 where Chris Middleton goes out there and, figuratively drops the ball, only scores 11 points. If the game plan going in tonight for Phoenix is let's watch Giannis and make sure he just doesn't cut us into pieces, that's going to put the onus on the Bucks supporting cast to really step up in a way that I'm not sure they can. Because it's one thing for Middleton to go off and have, the 27-point game that he had in Game 1 or or 29 points, excuse me. But now that the focus is going to be on him and Drew Holiday to step up with everyone putting their bodies towards Giannis. Chris Paul talked about building a wall, making sure that, Giannis doesn't get in the paint and just eat them alive. The supporting cast is going to have to step up, and I just don't see it happening, especially considering the Suns have still shot better than the Bucks the entire series. Even in the dreadful Game 3 loss from the field, the Suns still had a better field goal percentage. So for me, this is going to be a Suns win, and I can't see Milwaukee stepping up like they did at 2 games in a row.
You both made key points. Mike, bringing up my classic adage about playoff series that they never truly start until a home team loses a game. I believe that we saw in Jazz versus Clippers and Clippers versus Suns, the value of a home court environment for role players, and that the Bucks tonight, in having home court advantage for Game 4, as they did in Game 3, should be the benefactors of some good performances from their guys. I mean, role players are just better at the crib, man. They've got the fans behind them, and stars are the ones who are expected to perform regardless of the expectations. The role players having the home crowd backing them up, it really is huge, especially after a season in which teams played for practically no fans, and at the beginning of the season, literally no fans. We've seen the power of the crowd in this playoffs. However, Colin, Phoenix's number one adjustment in my head as well, before I even heard Chris Paul make those same comments, was that they're going to be packing the paint to stop Giannis Antetokounmpo. Me personally, with the Bucks having home court advantage, my definitely not name-related bias for Chris Middleton, and my long love for Drew Holiday as a basketball player. Ever since he locked up Dame in that playoff series, I've had nothing but respect for what he does out there on the court. I really do have faith in Milwaukee to even it up tonight. Now, my prediction before the series started was Phoenix in 7. I do still have Phoenix winning this series. I think they go home when it's tied 2-2. I think they win Game 5 and make it 3-2. I think they come back to Milwaukee for Game 6. And I really don't hate the odds of the Suns winning that Game 6 in Milwaukee, because Chris Paul, throughout his career, despite it being unfortunately marked by injuries in critical moments, whether in game or in season, has always been the type of player to really heat up when it matters most. The Suns being the first team to take an away game in Game 6 and win the series there in Milwaukee, if they don't just go home and win in Game 7. If they lose in Game 6, I think they're built for that. And that's why I still have the Suns winning this series. However, I'm going to side with Mike here and take the Bucks to win Game 4 as they did Game 3. I do think that this Phoenix Suns team, although I was very high on them coming into the season, has benefited from, injuries on their way to the finals, and that they might not be as great as the opening betting line Game 1, minus, I believe, 6.5 in favor of Phoenix suggested at the start of the series.
Yeah, I see a lot of things with this series. And one of the biggest things, like you mentioned, Colin, was Devin Booker having the one off game in Game 3. But unlike you, I'm not positive he comes back in Game 4. The Suns are 9-2 when Devin Booker has a game of under 33% field goal percentage, which he had in Game 3. But they even faced this Bucks team twice in a row. So I see that the Bucks being able to stop Devin Booker. And if you looked at how he's faced against Drew Holiday and Giannis this series, I mean, his field goal percentage has been brutal. So I really think that the Bucks could have an answer for Devin Booker heading into Game 4. I mean, if you look how he faced against Drew Holiday this series, he's 2 for 11 against him this series. Against Giannis, he's 1 for 6 against him. So I really think that they can find an answer for Devin Booker. And if they keep him at bay, it's going to be a really easy game for the Bucks, especially being at home. And even if Devin Booker has a good game, the 15, 20, 25 points, I still see the Bucks supporting cast playing well at home like they've done all playoffs. And that's why I think the Bucks take this one Game 4.
I can fully see how Milwaukee could be favored potentially. But the number that jumps off the page to me is that Devin Booker averaged 29 points in the first 2 games of the finals. for him to have that big of a drop off in game 3 it has to be a fluke. I mean, I'll use the same argument that I've heard used about Giannis, is that big time players step up in big moments. And I really do believe Devin Booker is going to be one of those guys for many years to come. And this could very well be his biggest opportunity yet to really cement his status as a permanent all-star in the NBA for a long time. Something else too, a lot's been said about the Bucks supporting cast, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday tonight on the show. The Suns have a pretty solid supporting cast as well. I mean, it's fully possible that a guy like Mikal Bridges or even Cameron Johnson, had a quiet 14 points in the ugly game 3, just steps up and really helps this team get a crucial win. I feel very good about the Suns heading into this game. I feel even better about their chances to win the series. And really, that's not a knock on the Bucks. I think that's more of just my confidence in the Suns as a cohesive unit, because, regardless of Chris Paul and Devin Booker, this is a team that has played well together all season long. They had a tough first round challenge against, albeit a battered Lakers team, but you got to feel good about their chances. I just think they've proven so much this season, and I think this is going to be interesting to see what they do.
Colin, I'm a fellow Devin Booker fan, supporter, believer, but I would be remiss to not mention that after averaging, almost 30 points a game in the first round, and then only, in air quotes, 25 points a game in the second and third round, his average this series, because of the poor game 3 performance, is down at almost 23. Although I do see the law of averages working in his favor there, and Booker to have a game 4 bounce back performance. I agree with you that players as skilled as Booker on the ball, as scorers, Chris Middleton being one of those guys who's at the top of the league in terms of scoring skill with the ball in their hands, they don't face walls like this forever. They find ways to break through, and they find ways to adapt. Does it worry you at all, though, that Booker's scoring average has decreased throughout the playoffs pretty consistently? It's, slight bump, 25.3 to 25.5 from round 2 to 3, but, several points down this round. Does that say to you that teams are starting to figure him out, or do you think that Phoenix just has been playing at a slower pace? Or I'm curious for your take.
Honestly, it would concern me with a typical player, but that's just it. I don't think Devin Booker is a typical player. Like, if you take that game 3 out of the equation in the finals, he's averaging those 29 points, which any team right now would take in a heartbeat, especially in the NBA finals. And there was a moment in game 3 where, Monty Williams came over and talked to him on the bench. A lot's been said this year about how great of a job he's done as the coach. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. What do you tell your young superstar after he really has his first terrible performance, in the finals? How do you get him back up to speed so he's ready for a game 4 showdown? Because that's essentially what this is going to be. I mean, no matter how you slice it, this game is going to be a battle, and I think Booker will be ready. I'm not concerned, honestly.
Yeah, I think a big thing in this series you also have to look at is how Giannis is going to do at the line, and he definitely shoots better at home. I mean, he's 13 for 17 in game 3, and if he's relentless in the paint, no one's stopping him, and the only way you really stop him is you send him to the line and hope he goes 1 for 2 or 0 for 2, and he shoots better at home, like 13 for 17, I said before. And if he replicates that in game 4, then you got to like the Bucks' chances too, because he's not going to be afraid from attacking the basket. And when he gets to the line, he's going to hit most of his free throws. And that's exactly what the Suns are not going to want happen. And a lot of their game plan is, okay, you want to come to the paint, we'll send you to the free throw line, and now you're going to make your free throws. So if he's making those, which I think he will tonight, I think that just adds to the Bucks' chances. And I really think it's going to be a tough game for the Suns to win if Giannis is scoring at will in the paint and he's hitting his shot at the free throw line. I mean, all of his points in game 3 were within 5 feet from the basket or a free throw. So, I mean, if he continues to do that in game 4, it's really tough to see the Suns' defense even having an answer. Even if Booker's on, even if Chris Paul's on, does this defense have an answer for Giannis? And then when he's attacking the paint and will, it creates so many opportunities for Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, that, in my opinion, it's going to be tough for the Suns to combat that, especially with the Bucks being home.
Will bring up a stat that I did admittedly just go find, but I had to go look into it because of how notoriously loud road crowds have been while Giannis Antetokounmpo is at the free throw line, counting how long he takes to get a shot off in an effort to distract him, and how quiet the Milwaukee fans are in response when Giannis is at the line. I mean, you can hear a pin drop in Wisconsin there when Giannis is at the line in front of the home fans in Milwaukee. I will say, however, though, that over the regular season, Giannis was actually 7% better from the free throw line on the road. Whether this was an anomaly due to a COVID-affected season, perhaps, but interesting to note that, 65 to 72% is a sizable difference. And the 65% was his number in 32 games at home this season. I'm with Mike that Giannis has a big game tonight, but Chris Middleton is the name for me to watch. I truly believe that at home, he will have a strong performance tonight. I believe he only scored 15 points in the Game 3 win, going to show that game truly did have the Greek freak and his dominance just written all over it. 15 points from one of the best scorers in the NBA, and they still won handily. Tonight, to me, feels like when Chris Middleton grabs this series and makes his effort to stamp his name on it permanently, go down in history books as the guy who took over Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Like you were saying about Devin Booker, Colin, Chris Middleton has that opportunity tonight as well. And I really do think he's a talented scorer, and that the home fans are going to very much swing things in his favor. Booker to have a bounce back game would be a great bet, in my opinion, but Bucks money line for me if we're talking Vegas.
Yeah, and on the Bucks side of things, another guy along with Middleton that really is due for a big game, or not due, I guess. He had a good Eastern Conference Finals, but I'd like to see him step up further in this series. It's Brook Lopez. I mean, how big would it be to get 20 points out of Brook Lopez and a couple of crucial rebounds? I mean, everyone's talking about Giannis just marching down the paint. Brook Lopez has been, the best anchor for them this year. So if he can play anything close to what he was in that series against Atlanta, they're going to be set tonight. I think he's the guy also that you can watch right now.
Yeah, I think
that was New Jersey Brook.
I think, for Brook Lopez, I think a big thing that really helped him was the lack of Giannis in those Atlanta games at the end. I mean, it filled a void in the paint, and we even saw he was so much better in that role than he is around the perimeter, shooting threes. And although he can hit that shot, I mean, when you're a 7-footer, you're going to score most of your points at a higher percentage inside the paint. But I think if the Bucks really try to dominate the paint, I know Aiden's been a terror this series and this playoffs. I mean, I saw a stat that I think in their first playoffs, him and Bill Walton have the most double-doubles in their first playoffs. And that really shows you how good he's been these playoffs. But when you have two guys like Giannis and Brook Lopez, you should really be getting most of your points inside the paint. And like you said, Colin, if Brook Lopez has a big night tonight, it's hard to see the Bucks losing. And let's say him and Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, if they have bad nights, then I think it goes in favor of the Suns. But I would like to believe that because they're home, that these role players are going to do their thing, and then Giannis is going to be as good as he always is.
I'm expecting a similar outcome. Lopez in this series is tough to project because of the matchup with DeAndre Ayton. So, as you were just noting, Ayton's been incredibly effective this series, and the NBA playoffs, I'm learning as I watch more playoff games, really are a lot about matchups. I mean, Chris Middleton, who I've been giving flowers all segment long for being a talented scorer, is up against Mikal Bridges, who's a really talented perimeter defender, and that's not necessarily an easy matchup either. Mike brought up No, it was Colin that brought up Cam Johnson earlier. And Cam Johnson, I wanted to say, is one of those guys who every time he shoots the ball, I think it's going to go in, regardless of where he is, whether he's in, his corner or above the break. It's going in when that shot leaves his hands. I mean, Phoenix is just molded very, very traditionally. Elite guard, elite wing scorer, elite big, bench point guard that can, keep things speedy, floor spacing four on the, like, this is a team just imagined out of basketball analytics nerds' greatest dreams, and realized. It'll be interesting to see if Giannis, his pun intended, freakish like athleticism and the scoring ability of Holiday, Middleton, and contributions from guys like Connaughton, who has stepped up in DiVincenzo's absence, and Lopez will be enough to overcome Phoenix. I want to pass one last question around. My answer is yes, due to my take earlier about home and road games. But I want to know, if Phoenix does pull off a win tonight and makes the series 3-1, is it over for you guys? Mike, you can go first.
Yeah, I really do think it is, because one, you steal the whole game, and then you got two chances at home to finish it off. And for me, that would be too much for the Bucks to come back. I mean, you think about the Cavs in 2016, they come back from 3-1 after winning game 3, but this team is not a LeBron-led team that has that championship pedigree. So when you look at the Bucks team to come back from 3-1 and you have no guys really that have really been there before, or your better players haven't, it's hard for me to think they could come back. I mean, this is a do or die game for the Bucks. I mean, all of them should be in each team's mind a must win. But if you really want to look at it that way, the Bucks really need to win this game.
Mike, I completely agree. I mean, this series is absolutely over if the Suns win tonight. I mean, and on top of that, on top of the idea that the Bucks don't have that championship pedigree, on the Suns side of things, you go up 3-1. Your point guard, Chris Paul, has never won a title. He will be one game away from doing so if you win a game tonight. That's a different type of motivating factor for a guy that's always been in question his entire career. I heard critics saying, is he a great point guard? This, that. No one's ever questioned his talent, but people have always kind of questioned his ability to step up in big games and win a championship. So that's a motivating factor in my mind. And if they go up 3-1 tonight, it's over for Milwaukee.
On the pro Milwaukee side, I will throw a bone to our potential listeners from Wisconsin. I will say that if Giannis pulls off this championship win, his resume at the age of 26 genuinely rivals those of Magic Johnson, LeBron James, names of the sort. Whether you like it or not, the raw resume, remove the name, remove the team, the achievements, really would have a case if they included not only a championship, but a finals MVP, which he, of course, would be winning if they did win the ring, to have potentially the best resume for a 26-year-old in the NBA ever. And that's something to consider. I want to pivot now, though, to our quick off-season discussion. Speaking of young players trying to make a name for themselves, there's a young player in the NBA, just 22 years of age, that has a reputation thus far throughout his career as being an empty stats contributor, a loser, to use a harsher term. Colin Sexton of the Cleveland Cavaliers is on the trade market, according to numerous reports, and Shams Charania of The Athletic reported yesterday that the Knicks of New York are his most aggressive suitor via trade. I want to know what you guys think about Sexton's fit on the team. The rumored package was Obi Toppin, Kevin Knox, and a first-round pick in this year's draft from New York. What do you guys think about that deal? I know Mike is a Cavaliers fan and has a take. And what would you guys think of Sexton joining the Knickerbockers here in New York City?
Yeah, I'll go first before I let Colin jump in. But I think it would be a big move for the Knicks. I think they need a scorer who can get points down the stretch. And I think Colin Sexton can do that. You look at his games against the Brooklyn Nets. I think about that 40-plus game he put up when the Big Three were first forming. And he put that Brooklyn Nets team away in OT, and he did so in a game I've never seen done before, hitting shots in OT, sending into OT. And he's that guy. And if you've watched Cavalier basketball, he can score at will. He's not great from three-point range, but he's highly effective when driving to the basket. And he's a gamer. I mean, he gives you 110%. He's a hard worker. I mean, he's averaged 4 points per game to each of his seasons. And he's had 3 years in the NBA. So he started with 16 points. He had 24 points last year. And you can only imagine what kind of jump he makes next year. And for that reason, if I'm in the Cleveland front office, I don't jump at the chance to take a 19th overall from the Knicks and Obi Toppin and Kevin Knox. I don't think that's enough for a guy like Colin Sexton, who's shown you the offensive production. And if I'm Cleveland, I would like to think RJ Barrett's the only guy in my mind that they could give me that's young enough that would equal out that deal. I mean, Colin Sexton's without a doubt a better offensive talent than RJ Barrett is. He doesn't give you the size and the defensive versatility Barrett does, but he's a better offensive playmaker, and he scores the ball like Barrett, I don't think, has shown in the past season. He's gotten better, but in the playoffs, he was very inconsistent. And I see a guy like Colin Sexton being able to do that in the playoffs, although we haven't seen it. He showed up in big games for Cleveland. So in my mind, just to get back to the point, I don't see Cleveland jumping at the opportunity for a 19th pick and 2 projects. It would need to be at least a guy like RJ Barrett or a more established player like maybe Simmons, maybe Brandon Ingram, maybe a guy like that if you go outside of the Knicks. But for me, I don't see this deal happening. Obviously, Cleveland front office may see it differently, but in my eyes, I don't see Sexton leaving for that price.
I don't think it's a deal that Cleveland should pursue. But if you're the Knicks, this is a perfect deal. I mean, numbers matter, and this guy averages 24.3 points a game. There were stretches this year where the Knicks needed those baskets. There were stretches where they couldn't score to save their lives. And, Derrick Rose helped fill those gaps, throughout the season, when there were days where Elfrid Payton couldn't drive to the hoop, couldn't shoot a three. Sexton kind of fits that offense pretty well. They like to play that ISO style of basketball. And to your point, Mike, there's days where RJ Barrett is very inconsistent. We saw that in the playoffs firsthand. Could Sexton help kind of lighten the load there and, maybe open things up for Barrett and Randall, and Noel if he's still around. And that even helps Derrick Rose, because if Sexton's eating all these minutes, when Rose does theoretically come in, he'll be rested. He'll be ready to go to score even more. I just think numbers matter. And in this case, the Knicks are a team that desperately needs scoring. And I think Sexton fits the bill here. I mean, and for the price, it's a no-brainer. Toppin doesn't really fit the offense that Thibodeau's trying to run in New York right now. And Knox hasn't really developed the way that anyone thought he would. So if I'm the Knicks, I jump at this opportunity. If I'm the Cavaliers, I seriously wouldn't do it.
Right. So to circle back to Mike's point, we were planning on discussing during this segment the news that the 76ers are seeking an all-star caliber talent in return for Ben Simmons. The league-wide perception on Colin Sexton right now would imply to me that he would not serve as the type of return that Philadelphia might be okay getting. So someone like Ingram or Simmons, that might be a bit much to ask for Sexton, especially with reports that the market for Sexton has been a late first-round pick. If the Knicks' best offer is Obi and a first-round pick, and it, as opposed to giving them the 32nd pick and Toppin, but not forcing them to take on Knox's salary, it seems to me that just might be the best deal Cleveland's able to get, because when you look around the league, cap space is not exactly in abundance right now. Teams that have been interested in Sexton include Miami, the Lakers, and Indiana. And I think that Indiana is the only team out of the Lakers and Heat that can offer a better package than New York. The Lakers package would, to me, be something like the 22nd pick in Kyle Kuzma. I'd rather have the 21st pick and Obi Toppin if I were Cleveland. Kyle Kuzma, $13 million a year, probably not the most appealing. Miami wouldn't give up Tyler Hero for James Harden. I doubt that they give him up for Colin Sexton. Precious Achiuwa and a 2022 first-round pick. Again, in a really deep draft class, a first round pick in this class in the middle of the first round, and Toppin and Knox, if you trust your development staff to get something out of him, might not end up being as bad of a package as you may think. However, I do agree with both of you that Sexton would fill a need for New York, and that I'll also say I think the league-wide perception of him is too low. I think he is a very talented player. I think nowadays, with the offensive infusion into the NBA, with how it's officiated and the amount of extra points that players are able to score, allows people to think that 25 point per game scorers grow on trees, and they just don't. They just don't. Not a rare, not a common player to find sitting around on the trade market. If Cleveland doesn't want to pay him big money and you're in New York and have the cap space that many other teams don't, got to get your foot in the door and talk to them about a trade offer. To me, with the way Knicks president Leon Rose seems to operate, not sure New York will be bidding against themselves and making a really strong offer, but I also don't think the Cavaliers would agree to a deal that vastly undersells the value of Sexton. So even as a Cavs fan, Mike, even if Sexton does, walk out the door, I can agree with you that I don't think Cleveland will be letting him walk for just any old package. It would require some value that they feel is legitimate in return for him. I do want to talk quickly about Ben Simmons. To put it bluntly, he had a playoff performance in which his coach had to yell at him to shoot a layup when it was open. I mean, that's tough. And for Philly to have committed a 5-year, $158 million max to him without getting into potential trade packages and trying to speculate on offers, I just want to know more vaguely if you guys would even look to trade Simmons right now if you were Philadelphia, due to the fact that his value is at such a low point. Do you value competing with Embiid now and just giving up on Simmons, or would you rather try to make Simmons work? Mike, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think you can't trade Simmons now. I think his value is so low after those playoffs, and the reports of the 76ers trying to trade him makes it so desperate, in my opinion, that the value shrinks even more. And for those reasons, I think you have to make this work. You committed to making it work. Now is the time to make it work. And I was a believer before the 76ers extended Simmons for 5 years, $177 million, that they should trade him for D'Angelo Russell in a trade with Golden State. I thought that would be a really good move to make because D'Angelo Russell gives you offensive scoring. He could work the pick and roll very well, and he gives you a lot of more freedom on the interior because he's not going to get all his points from inside the paint, and it's going to free up room for Embiid. And I thought that made a lot of sense. And I don't even know if you can make that trade anymore. I don't even know if Minnesota would take Simmons for D'Angelo Russell. Maybe they would, but I think that's the stock that Simmons price is at. It's so low right now that I don't think any team that is going to really touch him. So for those reasons, the 76ers really have to. And not only are you taking Simmons, you're taking that contract too. NBA team to ask for. And I don't think a team that's going to trade for him is really going to have to be buying that price. So the 76ers, we get a really low return, and they have to find a way to make this work because it's not going to happen by trading Simmons. I don't think they can get a return that's worth the price.
Colin?
I'm not certain keeping Simmons is any better, though, regardless of the return you get. I mean, I think they should throw a parade if they're able to ship him off for anything at this point. I mean, we knew he couldn't shoot a three-point shot. We knew Rivers wasn't going to make him develop into a three-point shooter. What we didn't, quite frankly, see coming was the fact that when the playoffs came, he would only shoot 34.2% from the free throw line, which is unacceptable for who's supposed to be your superstar. I mean, it was dreadful watching him shoot from the line. It was like watching paint dry. I'm not sure that, I know everyone in Philly likes to talk about trust the process. It's going to work eventually. It's not going to work. The closest you were was when you had Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, and Ben Simmons on the same team because you had three layers of talent. You had a guy that could distribute as a playmaker. You had Embiid in the paint, and you had Butler on the wing that could shoot a three, shoot from mid-range. And right now, yeah, you could make the argument that, Tobias Harris fills that role, but it's not the same. Jimmy Butler's of a different talent, in my opinion. And without that third piece, Simmons' value goes way down because he's relied on a lot more. And as we saw in the playoffs, he's not that guy. I think you got to ship him and move off. You're closer with anybody else than Simmons at this point.
Is there a particular trade package you think that the 76ers could get in return for Simmons that make him more of a contender than they are now?
I think anyone that can shoot the basketball.
Maybe
I'm not sure.
Minnesota, Malik Beasley and Jaden McDaniels, perhaps.
I don't know. I'm taking Simmons' defense before I go there. And the shooting is a problem. It is. But he just needs to reevaluate his role. He might not need to be the primary ball handler. There needs to be massive changes within the 76ers. But I don't think you replace the defensive contributions, the rebounding. There's a lot to replace that's outside the shooting. And I'm not sure if you get that done with a trade.
Absolutely. The offense is a big factor, and Embiid, being as good as he is, does need a second star. But, unless they can flip Simmons into that star, I'm not really sure how they'll make it happen besides helping Simmons develop himself. We'll have to see what Philadelphia does. I'm especially excited to see how the NBA Finals Game 4 turns out tonight. And as a Knicks fan, as you guys know, I am very excited to see how this Sexton saga plays out. We here on One Nightly will be heading into a break right now, but stay tuned because we'll be talking MLB with Colin as soon as we return. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to One Nightly, the digital exclusive version of New York's longest running Sports Call-In show. Shout out, as always, to our producer, Alex Willis, for making everything work behind the scenes. Colin and Mike, we are here now to begin our discussion this episode on the MLB. We had the All-Star game and the Home Run Derby. New York baseball players had their names all over All-Star weekend / beginning of week. And we had the MLB draft go on as well. And on top of that, a rule change for next season coming in from Commissioner Manfred. I want to get started, though, with the All-Star game. We had Taijuan Walker and Aaron Judge, local players, make contributions. The AL did win for, I believe, someone correct me here, the 8th year in a row.
Correct.
So, yeah, that happened. I will not disclose which team I predicted would win. And we had Pete Alonso, New York Met, take home not only the home run derby, but back-to-back home run derbies. I mean, good stuff, Pete. So I want to get started with Mike here. I know you're a Yankee fan and that your conference won the All-Star game. How do you think Aaron Judge looked, and what do you think of the win for the AL?
Yeah, I think it's a great win for the AL. It's a fun thing to watch, the All-Star game, because, I mean, we were chatting about it a little on the pre-production show, but I really think it's the best All-Star game around. I mean, that's an argument for another time, but the players are really playing to win. They're not going 100% like they would in a game, but there's defense, there's offense, and they take pride in winning. And you even think back to a few years ago when the All-Star game actually gave the home team home field advantage in the World Series, that if the AL won, the AL team would have home field advantage. And although that's not the case, it still matters to these players winning or losing. It's a sense of pride. And unlike basketball, a lot of AL teams don't even play certain teams in the NL and vice versa. So it's a really thing of, I guess, in my mind, pride about who wins. And I think it's a great watch. And Aaron Judge looked great. He makes that catch against the wall, going back on a ball. He looked good at the plate. And he's a great way to represent the Yankees. And Garrett Cole, obviously, you don't see pitch, but he's there too in a role as Chapman. And then on the Mets side of things, really happy for Taijuan Walker to get that All-Star bid, because he was a guy who's had a great year. He's never really been what he's been in his whole career, that the way he's been with the Mets this year. So it's a great addition, and he might be the best number 3 starting pitcher. So if you look at that, there's a lot going on in Mets baseball and Yankees baseball to make New York City a great hub for baseball. So it was a great thing to see in the All-Star game. I had a great time watching it. And then when you go over to the home run derby, Pete Alonso, who seemed to be hitting a home run every single pitch, the BP thrower through. And that was a masterpiece to watch. And the home run derby is really exciting, and it's one of the best things baseball has, in my opinion. So a lot for New York baseball this weekend, and it was great to watch.
Yeah, Mike, I think you said it all. It was a great All-Star game, great home run derby. I mean, the game itself, I mean, you got to mention Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s moonshot of a home run as he takes home MVP honors. But really, I was enamored by the home run derby. I don't know about you guys, but I just found it the most entertaining part of the All-Star game festivities. I mean, you got Pete Alonso, who is really coming into his own as a baseball player and understanding what it is he brings to the table. And I think that became more evident with this home run derby, where he knows he's not going to be a guy that maybe hits for a high average or ever wins a batting title, but he's a power hitter. I mean, this guy is a throwback to the Dave Kingman on the 70s Mets, in my opinion. He can just flat out hit the ball over the fence. And that was evident in 2019 when he breaks the rookie home run record. It's evident in the home run derby from 2019 as well. And this one on top of that, in which he hit 35 in the first round, which is a record for any of the individual rounds since they started doing it that way. And it was just a blast to watch. I mean, he's having fun with it. He's trying to pump up the crowd. He's bopping his head to Biggie Smalls and Nas, New York rappers, really representing the city in a way that I don't think a player really has in the last 5-10 years. So that was obviously fun to see. And something else I think is worth mentioning, Trey Mancini. I mean, what a fabulous story. I mean, cancer survivor.
Absolutely.
Fights all the way back. Almost outduels the polar bear in the home run derby. It was fun to watch him hit. I'm so happy that he got to All-Star game festivities. He's going to be a great player in this league for years to come. And it's really just a fantastic story.
I wanted to highlight Mancini's comeback from cancer to the home run derby as well. Really, really easy to root for. Really easy. It's that simple. Just support the guy, man. I don't know how you could root against him. However, as you were saying, Polar Bear Pete putting on for the city. I have to say, too, a segment of this show that would absolutely not exist a couple years back, but I have to make a little part of it now. The reaction on social media live on Twitter to the home run derby was really exciting to see. A lot of people were watching. A lot of people were invested and cheering on players. It was cool as someone who's half Dominican to see every Dominican player in the league cheer for Soto. But just online, the fan live response to the home run derby said something along the lines of baseball is back to me. Not that baseball, the sport, was ever gone, but the public interest. The last couple of years, the amount of jokes that have been made about Mike Trout being able to walk out into Times Square and go unrecognized are getting to be unfunny because of how concerned they make me for the sport that I love watching. I mean, I'm so glad to see how invested people on the Twitter timeline were in the home run derby, because it just says to me that we're back, man. The people care, and the product is improving despite, various certain specific comments regarding a potential face of the sport. Talent is talent, and I'm sitting here loving and appreciating it all.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned a little. We can't forget to talk about Shohei Ohtani and what he's done to this All-Star weekend, or week as we'll call it. He's made it so popular, really, and people are tuning in to watch him. He had the home run derby, and ESPN viewership for the home run derby peaked while Ohtani and Soto were having their derby off. So that really shows you what people are coming to watch. And then on the other side, he's starting for the AL, and then he's leading off. And that's something that is unprecedented, like we've talked about. But it really shows you what the way baseball can take their new generation of players, or the new movement they're trying to create around these players, where the kids let them play. And I think it's going to be really big for the game to let someone Ohtani really carry your face of baseball. And it's going to increase viewership because you're going to watch him pitch, you're going to watch him hit. I mean, he's got 33 homers with a 3.45 or 3.5. He's got in those ranges ERA while he's hitting 33 homers. I mean, that's something we've never seen done before. Even when Babe Ruth, I mean, you look back to Babe Ruth, he really was a pitcher with the Red Sox, and he wasn't the biggest hitter with the Red Sox. And when he came to the Yankees made a deal with him. Listen, we're not going to make you an everyday starter because we want you hitting for us. And he did relieve, he did pitch in the postseason, but what Ohtani is doing has really never been done before. And that's why the All-Star game and the Derby probably were most successful, because he's bringing a whole group of viewers that never would have watched baseball. Now they want to see someone pitch and hit, which is really something that we've never thought we would see, but we're seeing it right now.
Shohei Ohtani is truly marvelous. The fact that this guy can do what he does consistently between pitching and then hitting, like you said, Mike, he has 33 home runs. That's the first in MLB this year. He's remarkable. And on top of that, he's second in OPS. So he's hitting all these marks in terms of what he can do. And I can't think of a more perfect face of baseball right now, honestly. I mean, this guy is just fun to watch because of, the difficulty level of what he's doing out there. I mean, most of these guys, you're either a pitcher or you're a field position player. There's really no in between, and there hasn't been for a long time, since maybe Babe Ruth. And like you said, when he was with the Red Sox, he was a standard pitcher, a good pitcher at that. But it wasn't until he got to the Bronx that he was really known as this power hitter. So this is uncharted territory. And for those saying that Ohtani's not, qualified to be that face, I strongly disagree. And I think he's the first of many, many young players that could potentially lead this movement for the MLB into getting back into the mainstream. I think of guys like Tatis Jr., Ronald Acuna. I mean, just the list goes on, and people are genuinely excited to watch these guys play. I mean, that's something that I haven't seen with baseball recently. And it's nice to see that coming back, because it's reminding me of the NBA a little bit, in that you might not be supporting a particular team, but you want to see what Steph Curry does, or you want to see if LeBron can come back in the finals and have a great game, or you want to see if Giannis can lead the charge against the Suns. And I think the MLB is headed in that direction, where you have so much young talent that people are going to tune in just to watch this guy or that guy and see how great they can be. I think of Jacob deGrom. I live in New York. I turn on Mets games every 5 days, fully anticipating deGrom to be dominant and to strike out 14 guys. I mean, I genuinely look forward to it. And I can imagine people do the same with Ohtani when they tune in to watch him play, or they go to the ballpark. This is the path that the MLB has been blessed with now, with this young talent. And it'd be a shame not to let these guys go out there and be great.
Yeah, Colin, I really agree with a lot of things you say. And I think you make a really good point to one of the things that I've always been a fan of, which is letting pitchers hit and keeping the no DH rule in the NL. I mean, what's better to watch than DeGrom strike out 14 and he had 2 base hits, which he's done multiple times this year. And I think the continued movement that you have athleticism and you have Michael Lorenzo for the Reds who 2-8 for a while, and now you got Shohei Ohtani, is that if you let pitchers hit, it makes it exciting when pitchers do good things at the plate and then they're dominating on the mound. So although it's a thing that is not really what we're going to talk about today, but I think it's interesting to mention that there's a lot of things the MLB can do to promote the game and to younger audiences and to grow the game. And I think Shohei Ohtani could be an example of that moving forward.
Well, too,
I agree with you both. I mean, just to say quickly, when you've got that much talent, I don't care if you need an interpreter at all. It shouldn't be about that at all. It shouldn't be about how much talent you have. If you're a relief pitcher who does the job well and you have an interpreter, I don't care. Now, if Shohei Ohtani were the face of the sport and doing terrible things off the field, like criminal acts, like that's a different. He doesn't speak English, and that's not a crime, man. Absolutely a perfect face of the sport, in my opinion. I mean, you can go viral on TikTok for posting a video of Shohei just in the clubhouse trying to balance a baseball on his arm or anything of the sort. People love the guy, and I just think it's ridiculous that his ability or inability to speak English is even at all taken into consideration when it comes to him being a potential face of the sport. I want to get your guys' takes quickly on the MLB draft. The Mets getting Kumar Rocker made it a win for me. Fordham having some representation as well. Mike, I know you might want to get into that with your experience on the baseball club. It was a fun MLB draft for me too.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to talk about this MLB draft. I think it was really cool to see the coverage of it. Obviously, this is one of the earliest years ESPN has been covering the MLB draft. And there's a lot of talent there. I think I immediately think of Jack Leiter, the number 2 overall pick to the Texas Rangers. I mean, he throws upper 90s out of Vanderbilt. I mean, they're a baseball factory. He really was the best pitcher in the draft. There was no doubt about it. And I thought he was a lock to go number 1 to the Pirates. I really did. They get Henry Davis, catcher out of Louisville. But Leiter is a steal for the Rangers at 2. In my mind, he's the pitcher with the most likely chance of making the big league, to making an effect there. His dad, former pitcher Al Leiter. So there's a lot to love with this kid. I mean, he was dominant with Vanderbilt, and he really is the runaway candidate to be the fastest or the one of the best pitchers out of this draft class. And the other guy I thought that was interesting is to the Mets. His teammate, Jack Leiter, Kumar Rocker, number 10 to the Mets, is a bit of a project, and that's why he's kind of fell over the past few days. I mean, you look back a year ago, he was the consensus number 1 pick out of Vanderbilt. And then things happened. He didn't have as great of a year, but he still showed flashes. I mean, he has 4 legit pitches. He throws upper 90s. He's touched 100. So he'll be a project, but I think he's a great pickup for the Mets, who really handle pitchers really well. I mean, if you look back at their struggles for years, it's been the hitting, it's not been the pitching. So it's hard for me to think about a place where Kumar Rocker could have gone that's better than this. And one more guy I want to talk about to stay in New York is Trey Sweeney. He goes to the New York Yankees at number 20. He's a power-hitting left-handed shortstop, and I have some concerns about him. He struggles with hitting high velocity. I think there's a stat that shows he has no hits above 93 miles an hour, and that obviously is going to be trouble for him as he enters the minor leagues. And there's also concerns if he can continue playing shortstop position, and maybe he'll move to the outfield to third. So that's definitely a project for the Yankees. I would have potentially liked to see him go in another direction, maybe grab a pitcher. And they didn't do that. They elect to go with the shortstop here, but he will be a project. And listen, if someone like him figures it out in the minors, he's got the power. That is definitely there. And with the short porch and right, that's huge for a lefty. So there's ups and downs with this pick, but it's very interesting.
Absolutely. I want to highlight, as you were saying, the Mets' ability to develop pitchers. Kumar Rocker and I believe their next pick was a pitcher as well. Mets going after guys with high spin rates naturally. Perhaps a response to the crackdown on sticky stuff we've discussed here on one-on-one. But I got to say, for both New York teams, I think they can look at this draft as a success. They got some bites at the apple, no pun intended, for the New York City squads, and improved their teams. The Mets, I want to highlight, did not, as those from within the team highlighted, take a cost-saving approach in any of the first 10 rounds. Unfortunately for Mets fans, a very frequent previous occurrence under the Wilpons, under big money owner Steve Cohen, does not seem like it's going to be a problem. We're going to come back after this break, get into the Olympics, the Euros, and end up the show with more MLB talk. But until then, we'll be on break for the next 2 minutes. Expect us to return with Olympic news. Welcome back, everybody, to One-on-One Nightly. Chris Persianen here with Mike Calamari, back to talk about what we have very cordially referred to as international stuff before this episode. The Olympics, USA basketball, and the Euros. We had an England loss. It did not come home. It went to Rome. So we'll get into that as well. However, do want to start off with Team USA. Their 1-2 record has made headlines every time another game has happened, namely because the first two were losses. Nigeria has defeated the U.S. by 3 points. Australia, a team that we know and have known for years now, is a true international competitor of Team U.S., was able to rout them in their second exhibition game. U.S. did get a win over Argentina, 108-80 in their most recent game. But I believe that those opening losses are the much bigger story here. Coach Popovich out there with Team USA, upset with the performance, I would say, to the point where Popovich had a verbal anger infused argument with a reporter after game 2. That happened, and that's not very Coach Pop. So you could tell that he's frustrated out there with the performance. Going into this game against Argentina, how are you feeling about these opening losses for Team USA, Mike?
Yeah, it's hard not to look down upon this team and be very disappointed with the product you've seen. I mean, you look at the team they have. I mean, Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, Kevin Durant, Bam Adebayo. This is a team that should be really routing every team they face. I mean, they've got the talent. I think there's a lack of defense with this team. They have a lot of scorers, and they don't have a lot of guys who are ball stoppers. But then again, I don't think it really should matter. When you have a team of NBA All-Stars and you're going up against teams with a couple NBA players, maybe 5 or 6, and then maybe one NBA star at most, I mean, it really shouldn't be much of a competition. And to lose by 3 points to Nigeria and then to lose again, it's a lot of concerns for me. And at the end of the day, the USA will win the gold medal. That's not a concern, but you really have to think about this, that what's happening with this team that they're not able to perform. And I think a lot of it is the imbalance of scoring and defense and the inability for this team to coexist together. Regardless, I think they should beat these teams, but there's definitely a lack of chemistry and there is an imbalance between the offensive side and the defensive side.
Spot on. Colin was telling us before we started our show tonight that the lack of an interior presence on Team USA saved Bam Adebayo, who we know is about 6'9". It was concerning to him. Now we know Team USA is going to be getting Devin Booker and Drew Holiday from this final series. I believe Chris Middleton might be going as well. I think there's one more player that hasn't reported yet, but Levine coming off the bench for them, Booker and Holiday, still yet to join the team. Obviously a positive sign for Team USA. The biggest positive for me here though, Mike, is as a basketball fan, the fact that the product is improving. Nigeria has 7 active NBA players on their roster. I believe 6 played against Team US. I think that it's a positive sign to the game of basketball that these teams are able to beat the United States team. Australia, like I've mentioned, we know is a good squad, but a team like Nigeria, this is their 3rd straight Olympic appearance, being led by now. This is their first time, though, being led by an active NBA coach in Mike Brown. This is impressive stuff to me. And I don't see it as just a negative for Team US, but also as a positive for the sport of basketball, the game worldwide. And, Argentina has Luca Vildoza, who we know will be joining the Knicks, Facu Campazzo, Denver Nugget, Luis Scola, 41-year-old, still chugging, former NBA player, put up 15 and 6, I believe, on the USA at the age of 41. Quite impressive, Mr. Scola. However, my point remains that these countries that we do not see as basketball powerhouses like Nigeria and Argentina have more than one player on them each that are really good and can contribute clearly enough to beat a team like Team USA. Now, in their win against Argentina, we saw Team USA kind of get themselves together. So I was watching the game, potentially in part because New York Knicks Luca Vildoza was part of that contest. I got to say, man, Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, even Zach LaVine, when he got in the game off the bench, were really impressive to start that game. I believe they opened with a 28-12 lead due to just a barrage of 3-pointers. Greg Popovich has said that, he was upset with the effort in games 1 and 2. He was happy with the effort in game 3. Knicks coach Tom Thibodeau always says you have to play a full 48-minute game. Popovich made the point that, up until this 3rd game against Argentina, he hadn't liked their effort through the 4th quarter at all. I agree with you that this team is in a position to come away with the gold medal and is in a great spot in terms of looking around at their roster in comparison to those of the competition. However, the fact that they're not winning these exhibition games easy peasy is actually a positive sign to me, because this just might be the kick in the butt Team US needed to really have a dominant performance this summer. And like I said, it shows that the game is improving worldwide. So I'm happy there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And especially about it's growing. I mean, even look at the MVPs we've had the past 3 years. Giannis back-to-back, and then Nikola Jokic. So 3 foreign-born MVPs. And even the best player in the NBA, that's up for argument, but Luka Doncic also foreign-born. So I really like to see the game grow outside the United States, and it's going to make for a more competitive international basketball scene in the Olympics. And I think we all want to watch that as basketball fans. I don't think anyone really has fun watching USA dominate. And if you have competitive games, that's always a more entertaining basketball experience. So I think that's really good for it. And I think by the time they get to Japan and this USA team will be on the same page and they'll be a lot better, I really don't see them losing this gold medal. But anything can happen. I really see if you give the ball to Damian Lillard and Kevin Durant and they can really carry you offensively, it's going to be hard for any team to compete with that. And on the defensive side, they're going to have to figure out what are the best schemes to stop the offensive threats. And Bam Adebayo is a very big key to them. He's probably their best defensive player on this team right now. And outside of that, there's going to be things they need to figure out. But if they can use Bam as a cornerstone, I think they'll figure out defensively and they'll have no problem when they get to the Olympics.
I'm with you. I think that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, decisions like picking Kevin Love over players available like Jeremy Grant or Julius Randle still don't sit well with me. But with the backcourt of potentially Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal with, Drew Holiday and Devin Booker coming off the bench there,
that should do the job.
Team US will be just fine. A lot of talent, a lot of fun to watch talent as well. Guys like Tatum, guys like Durant, just are always able to put on a show. I hope that the increased competition means that we get a gold medal game similar to that in 2008 against Spain. I've watched that game back in full.
That was a great game.
In my free time. Over quarantine, I watched that game in full. Because we were watching just about anything during quarantine. But I have to say that's one of the methods of entertainment that I chose, that Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, just what a spectacular duo to see share the court. I hope this year's U.S. team has a pairing that can have a similar impact, whether it be Lillard and Durant or Durant and Tatum on the wings. I'm excited to see what this team can accomplish.
That is one thing special about the Olympics, just to see these players gel together. You just say Kobe and LeBron. It brings back so many memories about watching those play together for Team USA. That's one reason alone to watch the Olympics and watch basketball Olympics is watch players you never thought you would see on the same team share the court together.
Absolutely. Bryant and James never, unfortunately for, I believe them as competitors and definitely us as fans, never played against each other in a final series. But there was something about getting to see them face off in the All-Star game and share the court in the Olympic games that was just special to me. I was always a big fan of Olympic Melo, Carmelo Anthony always getting to shine as, a third or fourth option instead of the first option he was on the Knicks. I'm a fan of Olympic ball. I want to pivot now to the pitch. England, Italy. I have to say, as someone who does not watch a lot of regular season soccer, but does make sure to tune in for tournaments, one of the better games I've seen in terms of having me on the edge of my seat. England scored within 3 minutes. It was Luke Shaw who put it in back of the net and gave England the early lead, but it took until the 66th minute for Italy to equalize it. Italy had more possession than England percentage-wise throughout the start of the game. So if you were looking carefully, you might not have written them off from, that first goal 3 minutes in. But it was hard to think that Italy would mount a comeback, after scoring so early if you're England. However, like I was saying, 66 minutes in, they tie it. And after that, there wasn't too much action in that game, causing it to go to penalties. We saw Pickford. We saw Donnarumma go toe-to-toe indirectly in the pens, both making incredible saves. Pickford probably with a better highlight reel, but Donnarumma with an incredible last save to win Italy the cup. I just got to know what your reaction to that ending was, how you thought about that game, because that was really fun for me to watch.
Yeah, an absolute great game. And for Italy to make that comeback down a goal in the second minute, I mean, that's essentially starting off the game with a 1-0 deficit. And it was a defensive mislap that let that goal through, but they were able to come back. I mean, they really dominated possession for the entire game following that. I mean, England was content with sitting back defensively, essentially parking the bus and letting Italy pass it in the midfield and gain possession and momentum. And that culminates in the Bonucci goal off the rebound. And it's a complete flip of what we saw in the Spain game. I mean, Italy had their backs against the wall. Spain had a high defensive line. They were putting the pressure on Italy. Italy seemed to be constricted and had no way to move the ball in their midfield. And England let Italy dominate midfield. I think that was the big problem, that instead of continuing to attack and put the pressure on Italy, they sat back and they let Italy play their game and dominate the possession. And I think Italy's better in that sense than a counterattack style where they don't have the playmakers on the offensive end. Although Federico Chiesa was absolutely great for Italy. Insigne, amazing. Immobile, amazing. These players aren't breakaway players that can score goals. Insigne may be the one guy who has the speed and the quickness to get through a through ball past the high defensive line. But I don't think that parking the bus is a better approach than what Spain did. And I think that's what England did. They invited Italy back into the game because they weren't aggressive enough in getting a second goal. And listen, once you go to penalties, anything can happen. And Donnarumma was fantastic in those. Sor was picked forward. But there's also a lot of questions there, Chris. I mean, you think about the strategy. They bring Marcus Rashford off, and he takes a pen that might have been one of the worst penalties I've seen all tournament, and he misses it left off the post. And you take a guy cold off the bench and you ask him to hit a penalty. They also did this with Sancho. And you don't give the penalty chance to a guy like Raheem Sterling. He's probably been your best player all tournament. And although you might not view him as a great penalty taker compared to the rest of the guys on your roster, I'm giving my best player to give me the chance to score a goal in penalties rather than someone cold off the bench. And you might agree with me here, but I think there were strategy mistakes made by England in that penalty shootout. And Italy, listen, Donnarumma had a great penalty shootout, and he ends up winning it for them. But England, I was a little disappointed with their strategies throughout the game and in the penalties.
I think you're spot on about the penalties with England. I just don't understand how a 19-year-old was pulled cold off the bench to shoot a penalty, and the team's leader in Sterling didn't attempt one. It doesn't add up to me why England would put those guys in those positions. And then I did want to touch on, even just briefly, the absolutely ridiculous and unfortunate racism that the three players who missed penalties in Rashford, Sancho, and Saka have had to face. I really do feel for them. I think that not only, if they were meant to be taking those penalties and faced racism for missing them, it would be wrong. And they shouldn't even have been in those situations. I think this is mishandled all around, but especially and the most mishandled by the fans who have chosen to make racist remarks to those players, damaging a mural of Rashford with racist rhetoric. Not all right. Not a response to that, but it seems to be what's happened, and it's just not acceptable. However, as you were saying, England's strategy as a team just was not impressive to me. I was underwhelmed by the intensity that they brought to the game after that first goal. It did feel like they took their foot off the pedal. It didn't seem to me that Italy had taken a complete gigantic step forward in terms of quality of play. They made the best of their situation, which is, commendable. But I believe that if England had kept their foot on the gas, to reuse the analogy, and really push forward, it might not have gone to pens at all, because England would have had a lead at the end of full time. So although we will never know, the way it turned out, for Rashford, Sancho, and Saka just isn't right to me in terms of the coaching staff, putting those guys in those positions. And then, of course, the very, not just, I want to say immature, but just, again, unacceptable racist fan response, and unfortunate ending to the run for England, but a commendable win for Italy, going down 1-0 3 minutes in and coming out with the win in pens. I mean, no matter how it happened, it's a commendable sequence of events, and it takes a lot of fight to go down that early on the scoreboard, stop them from scoring, for the rest of full time, and to equalize it 63 minutes after the first goal of the game was scored. 90 minutes on the pitch is a long time, and for the amount of pressure that the players on Italy faced being down for that long, I was really, really impressed personally with just their fight, their resilience, and their persistence in trying to win this game. So congratulations to Italy for the cup coming Rome, and an unfortunate ending for England. But, regardless, have to commend Donnarumma for that last save, man. I still see it playing in my head, the clip. I mean, just what a moment. I feel like thousands of held breaths were released around the world, millions, whether for a scream of joy or terror. Just what a moment that penalties are able to create, regardless of your thoughts on them deciding a championship game, which is a debate for another time. We're going to be heading into break now here on One-on-One Nightly, but we'll be right back with Colin to discuss the MLB second half. We have the Mets and the Yankees, two local teams. We'll revisit both of them and talk about how their paths to potentially the postseason and even deeper within it can go. So join us, stay with us here on One-on-One Nightly. We'll be back right after this break. Welcome back, everybody, to One-on-One Nightly. I'm Chris Persian, and here with Mike and Colin for our final segment of tonight's show. Wanted to start off, though, with an update from the NBA Finals, Game 4 happening in Milwaukee. The score is 33-31. Phoenix is in the lead. Their leading scorer, Devin Booker, with 8 points. Colin, your bounce-back projection, not looking too shabby. However, over on the Bucks side, their leading scorer, Chris Middleton, with 9 points. Giannis Antetokounmpo with 8 points and 6 rebounds already, 2 assists as well for the Greek Freak. So a strong showing for the key players on both sides. Chris Paul having only 2 points, but 4 assists to start. 7:45 left to go here in the second quarter over in Milwaukee. We are here now, though, in this final segment, as I was saying, as we wrapped up the previous one, to talk about the MLB and our two local teams here in the Yankees and the Mets. I want to get started with the Yankees. This is a team that, to be honest, this season has disappointed. I'll reference it again. Ron Bloomberg, first DH in MLB history, said to me in an interview for One-on-One that people go to Yankees games to see wins, that the history of the franchise can, in fact, kind of be used, as an extra weight on their shoulders when in the midst of a season like this. The frustration can build a little more easily. The Yankees, I'll say it again. I don't think this season is over. I think this season is absolutely within saving reach. Yes, the offense needs to improve, for the whole team. Someone like LeMahieu performing a little better recently, maybe Torres and Chapman on the pitching side there for Chapman can step up. Someone like Luke Voigt getting back his real just power slugging touch. That could go a long way for this Yankees team. I think, though, I want to start the discussion with Mike and a question regarding a potential trade. If you're the Yankees, if you're Cashman, are you looking to go get a starting caliber pitcher before this trade deadline? Is this a need for you?
Yeah, I think a pitcher would be really nice. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Joey Gallo potentially being the trade acquisition that the Yankees go after. But like you said, I think a pitcher is a better move for the Yankees. I mean, let's look at the staff. I mean, Garrett Cole is really the only reliable starting pitcher the Yankees have right now. I mean, you look at his game against the Astros, his most recent start, he does 129 pitches in 9 innings. Absolutely marvelous pitching performance from him. 3 hits, 2 walks. He's your guy. But after that, it gets really worrisome. I mean, Domingo Germán, he's not been what he's has been in the past. Jordan Montgomery is always up and down. He's not a consistent pitcher. And he's always going to float around that 4.5s in the ERA. And then after that, with the Corey Kluber injury, who was your established number 2, you're really searching for other guys. Nestor Cortez has been great for you, but he has his innings limitations. So there's a lot to look for in this team. And Jameson Taillon, you're never really sold on him. One time he looks great, but he's been very inconsistent throughout this year. He looked good in the Astros series, but he's really not been a good pitcher. He's been a 3 or a 4 at best. So there's really a lacking for a second starting pitcher, and you hope Luis Severino could be that guy. But listen, he goes in a rehab start, and then he has another injury, this time in the lower half. But there's very questions about will he even be back? And if he's back, it's going to be for the playoffs. And the Yankees aren't even sure if they're going to get there. So, yes, I think the time is now to get a starting pitcher if the Yankees are in a win-now mode. But like I've said in past shows, I don't think the Yankees should be buyers. I don't think they should be buyers because they haven't shown me anything that makes me think they are a playoff team. I mean, they looked great against Seattle. They looked great against Houston. But they still showed their flaws. I mean, you take that last game against Houston, they go into that last inning with a huge lead. Chad Green's been your guy for the past weeks, but he blows it in there. So a tough loss for the Yankees, but they're unwilling to close the door in a lot of these games this year. So it makes me worried about, are they really going to be able to contend for a wild card spot? I mean, they're 4.5 games back, but if you look at the teams ahead of them, I don't really see them eclipsing them. Now, that being said, I look at the Yankees' schedule ahead, and if they could put together a series of wins, then you start talking about making an acquisition at the deadline. In your next 13 games or in your next 15 games, you play divisional opponents 11 times, and that's the Red Sox and the Rays. So what you need to do, if you capitalize on those games and you can come out with 7 wins of the 11 against divisional opponents, then we're talking about a team that could be ready to make a play for the wild card of the division. But you haven't beat the Red Sox yet, and you're losing the season series against the Rays. So in my mind, you really need to capitalize on the divisional games if you really want to make a leap into, all right, now we're going to be buyers at the deadline, because we have not seen them beat the Red Sox yet, and they're going to be the team you're going to see down the road of the playoffs. So I want to see you beat them in the playoffs before I'm willing to be buyers at the deadline.
Not to be overly dramatic for the Yankees, but this series coming up against the Boston Red Sox, the first place Boston Red Sox, will be the most important series of the year for them. It will make or break the Yankees going forward, in my estimation. I see it the same way as a fighter going into the ring for a boxing match. It's all about setting a tone. And right now, the Yankees need to set a tone for the second half going forward, because like you said, Mike, they were abysmal against Boston in the first half. 0-6 is not good. I don't care who you play. You could have played the best baseball team on earth. If you want to make the playoffs, you got to win more than 0 games. That's just a fact of life at this point. And I got news for you. Boston's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're only going to get better. Evaldi right now is our ace, Nathan Evaldi, who, 9-5, mid-threes ERA, not bad, but we're going to get Chris Sale back. Once the Red Sox get Chris Sale back and Nathan Evaldi, you'll have two pitchers that can genuinely qualify to go more than 6 innings per game, which is something right now that the Yankees have trouble with. Other than Cole, their pitchers haven't gone deep into games. You said that there's a possibility that Severino comes back. Is he going to be the guy that gets you over the hump? I don't know. And on top of that, the talent level that the Red Sox are utilizing right now is astronomical. I'm laughing right now as a fan of baseball because it was December, and I sat down and read an article by Dan Shaughnessy, Boston Globe, who said the Red Sox are going to be abysmal. There is no hope for this team going forward. He was basically giving all of this credit to teams like the Dodgers, who weren't afraid to go out and spend money, weren't afraid to go out and make moves when necessary, and basically begrudging Boston for taking this, view of let's put together a team that can play kind of like the Rays. And then, months later, we're sitting here in first place with guys like Kike Hernandez, guys like Bobby Dahlbeck, Alex Verdugo, who beginning of the year, no one would have said those guys would be as good as they are. And on top of that, last year, I had to listen to people say JD Martinez is washed. He had a pretty subpar 2020. This year, the guy comes back. He's playing amazingly. This is a team that's second in hits, third in RBIs. They're an offensive juggernaut. And once you get Chris Sale back, they're going to be that much better. And I'll say one more thing about how I feel about this Red Sox club and why the Yankees should be worried. They're calling up Jared Duran now. Outfield prospect, hit 15 home runs in Worcester in AAA. This reminds me so much of that 2013 team where they called up Xander Bogaerts, got a guy more reps, more experience, and look at how Bogaerts turned out. Right in that all-star game with the likes of Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge the other day. So if you're the Yankees right now, you've got to set the tone in this series against the Red Sox. You have to throw that first punch and make sure that everyone knows you're in this to win this.
Absolutely. I think to Mike's point about being buyers, maybe you could look at a Jose Barrios as an option to go pick up on the trade market, but the price just might be too high for the Yankees to stomach. One other suggestion I might make from a team that has admitted that they are going to be sellers at the deadline, maybe Zach Davies from the Cubs could be a pickup for the Yankees at the pitcher position. But other than that, I'm not really sure, besides, maybe a Tyler Anderson on the Pirates, who might be truly available for a price that the Yankees can stomach and are willing to pay for this season. I agree with Colin that they've got to look at Boston as a real competitor. I want to transition for the end of this show to the team over in Flushing, and I'm going to do it by making the case for the Mets as a dark horse team to make the World Series. Now, I'll start off with my biggest concern. Luis Rojas, their manager, has not been particularly great in game, but he has not lost the locker room. They're playing for this guy, and they're playing hard. And for a clubhouse, rather, that, had J.D. Davis, Nimmo, Conforto, McNeil out with injury, and Carrasco hasn't pitched for this team yet. Syndergaard was expected to return now, won't be returning until September 1st. Lindor, as Dolan Balsamo told us on one-on-one the other week, adjusting to this big lifestyle and salary change. With an acquisition like Chris Bryant at the deadline from the selling Cubs, this team absolutely might have the perfect storm of emotions, on-field talent, hugs per game in the clubhouse to really get together and put together a dark horse World Series run. I want your guys' quick take on this before we wrap up for the night.
Yeah, I'll go real quick. I'm a little more skeptical of this Mets team. I'll be quick because I know we're short on time, but I think they've kind of been treading water recently. I mean, they're coming off a 33-game stretch in 31 days, and over that span, there have been 17-16, and they finished where they started. They're 3.5 games above first place. So when you look at it like that, I think this Mets team really needs to say, listen, we have a chance to really win this division and get home field advantage in the playoffs. And I don't think they should be content with going just above 500. I mean, they're 47-40, and the Yankees are 46-43. And think about how bad the Yankees are looking at their season, how good the Mets are. So if I'm the Mets, I really take advantage of this, and I go at every game and I try to get a lead. And listen, I know it's easy to say, and talk is cheap, but if the Mets can hit, then they're going to win. And that's the bottom line.
Colin, let's hear your take on the Mets before we wrap up for tonight.
I know we're short on time, so I'll leave it at this. Any team that has Jacob deGrom, Marcus Stroman, and Tejon Walker as your three-man rotation heading into the postseason will be set. As long as this team can score a run or two in the playoffs, they will be set, in my opinion, because pitching wins games, especially in the postseason.
And with Cookie Carrasco looking to make a return, the Mets just might have another great pitcher with Syndergaard in September and 2 in Syndergaard and Carrasco. Like I was saying, this perfect storm, this Doctor Strange 1 in however many million, possibilities, this might be the universe in which that storm is able to come together. I want to thank you guys for joining me on tonight's show. Thank again our producer, Alex Wolz, for putting everything together behind the scenes as seamlessly as he does. And thank our listeners for joining us tonight on One-on-One Nightly. This has been a production of WFUV Sports. Our sports director is Bobby Chiafardini. Make sure not to miss clips of this episode going up on YouTube and our Saturday episode, 90.7 FM from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., like I said, this Saturday. So thank you again to everyone for listening. It was a pleasure spending tonight with you guys, and we'll see you next time here on One-on-One.